Shift gears now, and I'm joined by my good colleague from Virginia, Congressman Moran, and we're going to talk about gun violence. You know, those of us who've been victims of gun violence see horrific pictures in our minds over and over again. Mine was over 30 years ago, but I am still haunted by visuals of that day. My leg being blown up and my arm being blown up and really thinking that I was going to die. And when you look death in the eye, there's a certain clarity that comes to you, a certain clarity about what's important, a certain fearlessness to deal with issues that maybe you wouldn't have dealt with under other circumstances. So I am haunted by more recent events in Newtown. I'm haunted by the story told by Veronique Pozner about little Noah, her son. Little Noah was shot 11 times. A little child shot 11 times. And she made a point of having an open casket at his funeral for one reason. Because this is not just about numbers. This is about human beings. This is about visualizing what happens when someone is gunned down. She had an open casket, and she invited the governor of Connecticut to the funeral because she wanted the governor to see this little cherub face. And she said, it's not little angels going to heaven. This little boy had his mouth blown off, and his jaw gone, and his hand gone. She wanted the governor to remember that little face when legislation came to his desk. You know, it's time for all of us here in this House to stop thinking about numbers and start thinking about people. Yes, over 1,800 people have died since Newtown, and over 500 of them have been children. If we do nothing else but focus on the children in this country, that should call us to action. I'm going to talk about a child from my district, an infant, a 3-month-old infant. This infant was named Isaac Jimenez, just a little tyke. His parents had gone to a baby shower, had come from the baby shower, had put him in his car seat, and the mother and the father with the 4-year-old child were in the front seat. And mistaken identity, a gang member, 2 young kids, 16 and 17 years of age, came and shot up their truck. Killed this little boy. Killed him. His parents were shot. The 4-year-old was spared. 16 and 17-year-old kids, when they were found, they had extra handguns. They're not legally allowed to have those handguns, but somehow they got them into their hands. We are not debating the Second Amendment when we talk about gun violence prevention. The Second Amendment is secure. It's even more secure since the Heller decision, when the Heller court said the Second Amendment guarantees every American the opportunity to have a gun for recreational purposes and to protect themselves in their home. But having said that, it also provides government with the right to provide certain levels of regulation. So what are those certain levels of regulation? Well, why don't we start with something really simple, really straightforward, and that is universal background checks. Don't we want to make sure that people who come in to gun dealers to buy guns legally have the right to buy the gun, that they're not felons, that they're not ex-felons, that they haven't been charged and convicted of drug trafficking, that they aren't convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence, or that they haven't been adjudicated by a court as being mentally incompetent? Well, of course we do. And this number says it all. A Quinnipiac poll this month said that 92% of Americans, 92% of us, believe that we should have universal background checks. Why can't we come together, Republicans and Democrats, parents of small children and older children, people who have encountered on one level or another gun violence, and say, certainly we can do this. Certainly we can have universal background checks so that guns don't get in the wrong hands, so that a 16 and 17-year-old kid doesn't get a hold of a gun and then shoots up an innocent family. So, what does Wayne LaPierre say about that? Well, this is pretty interesting. Wayne LaPierre, back in 1999, after Columbine, was really clear about universal background checks. He said, on behalf of the NRA, we think it's reasonable to provide mandatory instant criminal background checks for every sale, at every gun show, no loopholes, anywhere, for anyone. That's what he said in 1999. Now, mind you, a recent poll by Frank Lutz, a Republican pollster of just NRA members and non-NRA gun members, found that 74% of NRA members and 83% of gun owners support a universal background check. So did Wayne LaPierre in 1999. What is he saying today? Well, today, before Senator Leahy, when asked, you don't support background checks in all instances at gun shows, Mr. LaPierre responds, we do not, because the fact is, the law right now is a failure. The way it is working, none of it makes any sense in the real world. Well, I would submit to my good friend, Mr. Moran, that this is the real world, and we're dealing with real people. And I know that you would like to comment from your perspective on the state of gun violence and the lack of gun violence prevention in this country. And I would like to yield to you.
I thank the very distinguished gentlelady from California. Thank you for heroically sharing with us that horrific experience that you went through in your very early adulthood, and that understandably continues to shape your view of gun violence. Hopefully others will share that view without having to go through such horrific experience. But thank you particularly for putting a face on the tragedy at Newtown and the gun violence that we have experienced all too often in this country. I do think that the tragedy of 20 tiny little children being blown to bits has changed the conversation, changed the attitude of the American people, as evidenced by the 92% who understand that universal background checks are appropriate. And in fact, more than 3/4 of NRA members believe that to be the case, despite what Mr. LaPierre's official position is. It would seem that perhaps he's more interested in representing the gun manufacturers than the members of the association. But I also learned today, as many of us did, that the chair of our Judiciary has decided that the Judiciary Committee is not going to be considering universal background checks out of concern for the inconvenience that it may cause gun purchasers.
Would the gentleman yield on that point?
Yeah, please.
I was unaware that he had made that statement today. You know, in California, we have universal background checks. We have a universal background check for private sales, in which you have to do it through a local gun dealer. Mm-hmm. And even with all of that burden, you might argue, if that's what the Judiciary Chairman is arguing, 600,000 guns